A week from now, the criminal trial of former Donald Trump campaign chair Paul Manafort will officially begin. The first high-profile case brought by special counsel Robert Mueller. Today, a group of potential jurors met with the U.S. District Court judge overseeing the trial and answered some questions to whittle down the pool. Manafort, who was accused of bank and tax fraud, was in court yesterday when the judge ordered Mueller's team to identify the list of witnesses and delayed the trial until next Tuesday, giving Manafort's lawyers just a little more time to review a mountain of evidence prosecutors plan to introduce. Evidence like bank records, invoices, photographs, emails related to his lobbying firm, and even a licensing agreement for New York Yankees season tickets. Manafort better hope a Red Sox fan isn't on the jury. But while he's playing defense, Donald Trump is doing the opposite, attempting to execute the art of the interview with Mueller. As often happens, Trump's feelings about a sit-down have shifted. Here's what the president said just last week on the topic.
Are you more likely to sit for an interview now?
My lawyers are working on that. I've always wanted to do an interview.
And now there's an offer on the table from his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, but like everything, there's a catch. Trump is only open to answering questions about collusion, but not obstruction of justice. To examine all of this and maybe a Michael Cohen audio tape or two are William Weinreb, former acting U.S. attorney and lead prosecutor in the case against Boston Marathon bomber Dzhokhar Tsarnaev. Good to meet you, Bill. Thanks for being here. Ben Clements is a former federal prosecutor who served as chief counsel for Governor Deval Patrick. Ben, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Jim.
So, Bill, the case against Manafort, if I understand, is, as I said, tax and bank fraud. No direct connection to Trump or the campaign. In fact, the prosecutor said yesterday, I don't anticipate that a government witness will utter the word Russia. So what's this got to do with Trump, other than maybe if there's a guilty verdict, I assume it's more likely Manafort flips on his former boss. Is that it?
Well, there are a couple of possibilities, Jim. Manafort was of interest to the investigation, and as you start digging into whether somebody has done one thing, sometimes you discover they've done another thing. If it's a crime, you don't walk away from it.
But he's not being prosecuted for those other things right now, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. It may be that they were looking for something related to Russia, related to the heart of the probe, and what they found was stuff that he had done in the past. As you say, it preceded the time that Trump was in office. It relates to money laundering and tax fraud. But those are crimes. And if you're a prosecutor, like Mueller, you don't just walk away from those. You do something about it. It may also be that they're hoping to put some pressure on him, and they're hoping that if he's convicted...
Vis-a-vis his former boss.
Exactly, and that he will cooperate.
Is there more potential to...
Well, I think so. I think everything Bill just said is absolutely right, but I do think there is more to that. For one, I believe that there is some evidence that was alluded to that they expect in this trial that relates to some funding that was provided to Manafort for someone who was hoping to have a job with the Trump campaign. But perhaps more to the point, the trial that is scheduled for later in the year in Washington, D.C.
Of Manafort.
Yeah,
another criminal trial.
Raises issues that much has to do with his work on behalf of Russia, on behalf of the Ukraine, that ties potentially much more closely to the heart of the Mueller probe.
Let's assume in this case that Mueller gets a guilty from the jury. And let's assume, all hypothetical obviously, the President of the United States says, I'm going to pardon this guy after his guilty plea. I know he doesn't even need, guilty verdict. He could pardon him tomorrow. Can a pardon by a president be part of a special counsel's obstruction of justice case, or never the twain shall meet?
Absolutely.
It can be.
Yes, absolutely. No president has ever done anything close to that before. No president has ever even publicly entertained the idea of pardoning people who could be witnesses against that president, especially in the midst of an investigation concerning that president. But certainly that pardon could be seen as an abuse of power, just as the firing of Jim Comey could be seen as abuse of power, both obstruction of justice and, frankly, an impeachable offense.
Do you agree with that?
Well, as Ben says, it's never been done before, and I think for that reason it's unknown. It's untested.
Could you make a credible argument to the effect of what Ben just said, that a pardon is part of an obstruction scheme?
I have heard the argument made, and I think it can be made, but I think that, frankly, I think it's a lift, because the pardon power is so absolute, and it has never really successfully been challenged under any circumstances. This would really be breaking new ground.
Okay, you sat in the U.S. Attorney's Office for what, 20 years?
Yes.
Okay, Rudy Giuliani comes up to you and says, here's the deal. We'll talk collusion if you want to interview my guy, but no obstruction of justice. Do you take that deal?
It's possible.
Why would you take? It would seem to me as a layperson, well, I was sort of a lawyer in my former life, but not your kind of lawyer. It would seem to me if a lawyer for someone potentially under investigation says, I don't want to talk about X, it's much more likely that the thing that he is guilty of is X, or you wouldn't ask to have it off the table, would you? Is that a ridiculous conclusion to draw?
It's not a ridiculous conclusion.
Thank you very much.
But I would say that there are a lot of reasons you might want to take something off the table. Even if you don't believe you're guilty of it. You may believe that somebody could misconstrue things and find you guilty or think you're guilty of it.
No, I understand why a defense attorney would want that, but why would you as a prosecutor ever agree to such a deal?
Well, because you're really interested in what the person has to say
Getting
on the other
whatever
subject.
you can.
And remember, this isn't just any person. This is the President of the United States. And it's over time, the Supreme Court on down, everybody has recognized that special considerations are sometimes made for the President.
Would you take the deal?
Well, no, not in Bob Mueller's shoes. I think the comments Bill makes are certainly true about criminal investigations generally. If someone is a subject is going to come in and volunteer information, you want it. But this is a little different. And I think you really have to consider Rudy Giuliani's biases here. The President's been playing a game for a long time of saying, I really want to be interviewed, I really want to talk to the special prosecutor. Meanwhile, he's delaying, avoiding.
But if I'm Bob Mueller, I say to myself, if I don't take this deal, then talk about untested waters. Am I going to subpoena the guy before a grand jury? Am I going to go to court to comply? His appearance, all of which is sort of open case law too, and could go on for years potentially, and you might lose.
Absolutely, all those things are true, but he was appointed in the face of obstruction of justice by the President. That was the start of his investigations. You know what I don't,
this whole interview is about, here's what I don't understand, and you were here to explain it. I don't know if you've ever seen any of the depositions Donald Trump has done in civil matters, in which he literally, we've played some here, changes his position on issues in the same sentence. Don Jr. wrote that. Well, we have your signature. Well, actually, I signed that thing. Can you ever imagine, if you're the defense lawyer for Donald Trump, ever allowing him to be questioned by a special counsel?
So this was what I was going to say when you mentioned that the President has said more than once he really would like to tell his story. I'm a defense attorney now, and I'll tell you that that people who are under scrutiny, who are being accused of things, very, very commonly want to tell their story. They believe that they're innocent, or they believe that there's context to be given. And lawyers, on the other hand, know that people very seldom say things exactly the same way twice. They have bad memories. They may say something and then remember something different.
So you'd say, Mr. President, I know you want to testify, but trust me, you shouldn't. Is that what you're saying?
Right. So I'm saying that those two things, his saying he wants to talk and his lawyer advising him not to, are not inconsistent.
Okay,
That's a common
we go to a third? I don't understand this either, and then we'll end this thing. I don't understand why the President's lawyers have waived privilege on the audio tapes that were seized from Michael Cohen. We know that one is of a phone conversation. We believe we know that one is of a phone conversation between candidate Trump and his fixer, his Michael Cohen. We don't know what the other 11 are for. Why did the President's lawyers say, we'll waive the privilege here, take him?
There's a number of possibilities, Jim, but to me the most plausible is that they recognize if they resist turning over those tapes or letting the government have the tapes, the prosecutor's office probably would take the position that the tapes are not subject to the attorney-client privilege because of the crime-fraud exception.
So litigate it and you ultimately get the tapes.
That's the
Why
problem.
give them to them?
That's the problem. They don't want a public litigation. They don't want any litigation about the issue of whether Michael Cohen and Donald Trump were committing crimes when they had those conversations.
You're nodding in agreement?
Yeah, I'm with Ben on this one. I think that's the likely.
Okay, then can we end with something just for you?
Sure.
Back to your former life. You remember those days?
Yeah.
Yesterday, the Globe reported that that Dzhokhar Tsarnaev's lawyers are processing an appeal. They're asking for an extension. Here's part of one of the lead lawyers said, this is about knocking out the death penalty. The sentence includes issues concerning venue, multiple errors in the selection of the death-qualified jury, and the admission of evidence obtained for the use of Mr. Tsarnaev's involuntary confession. What's your reaction to what you've heard so far about from his appellate lawyers?
Well, those are all issues that were raised during the trial and were decided against the defense in many respects. We anticipated that they would be appealing on those issues and others. That's a pretty standard kind of thing, so I don't think there's any news
You're
there.
confident?
Well, we believed in what we did below, and so the judge sided with us on those issues, and we fully expect and hope that the Court of Appeals will as well.
Really good to meet you.
Yeah,
Thanks so much for your
Thanks
time.
for having
Appreciate it,
me.
Ben.
Good
Great
to see you, Jim.
again.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for explaining a few things to me, gentlemen.